Today I will show you a magic trick. Actually, today I will show you how to use blending modes in Photoshop. So, let's start. Hey guys, it's Nemanja and welcome to another really fun episode. Today I will talk about the blending modes in Photoshop. They are really powerful and important tool to master. So without further ado, let's the fun begin. Welcome to Photoshop, guys. Let's start by showing you where you can find the blending modes. Here on the Layers tab, you have a drop-down menu with 27 different blending modes. And we have another blending mode for the groups and two more for tools like brush, clone stamp tool, and so on. We will go through that a little bit later. But before we start, let me tell you what the blending modes are. They're basically a set of Photoshop algorithms that will take a pixel from one layer and it will blend with a pixel from another layer or layers. And it will produce a completely new result. So now that you know what the blending modes are, let's go and tell you something about each of them. If you go here to a drop-down menu, you can see that blending modes are split into 6 different groups. First group we can call a normal, and first blending mode is normal. So now if I go and reveal this luminosity card will help us to understand the blending modes a little bit better. Here we have black, 50% gray, and white color, and here at the top we have black, and then by increments of 10% all the way to complete white color. This is 50% gray and so on. All right, and now this blending mode for this luminosity card layer is set to normal. Normal blending mode, and the next one here in the normal group, dissolve, will not blend pixels together. It will just work with opacity or fill slider in Photoshop. So now if we want to produce some kind of result, we need to play with opacity slider, and the only result is to make this layer more or less opaque. And this is why we call this normal. Dissolve blending mode is the same. It will not do anything to your image until you start messing with opacity or the fill slider. Then you will see some speculars here, something like grain or noise. And actually I never ever use this blending mode in layers. If you know some useful application of this blending mode in layers, please let me know that in the comments. I actually use this blending mode a lot, but in a brush. I will show you really quickly. I'll create a new layer, go to a brush, and then here in the modes, I will set blending mode from normal to dissolve, and I will use maybe white color. Let me see. Let's use white color. And now if I paint with white color, I will have this crazy effect of a brush. I will have something even better if I lower the opacity a lot. I will have something like this. We can create maybe snow, or maybe something like, you will see, dust or particles or anything that you want by adding a blur to this layer. Let's use a Gaussian blur, and depends of the blur amount, you will see different effects, something like crazy particles, or I don't know, something like smoke, mist, dust, or anything else. This is really nice and I use it all the time. Over the top of this we can add even more of these crazy particles and then blur it everything again, and so on and so on. You can play with that and achieve really nice and interesting results. So that's the only time when I'm really using this dissolve blending mode in a brush. Alright, this was the first out of 6 groups of blending modes. Now let's go and check what the second group will do to an image. Right here you can see that second group contains 5 different blending modes, and we can call that group Darken because the final result will be a darker version of that image that you're messing with. And I like to call this group White because white color, it's completely invisible to this group. So first blending mode is Darken, and if I put this luminosity card into Darken blending mode, we will have this crazy effect. The Darken blending mode will not blend pixels together. It will just compare the pixels from the current layer and the layer or layers down below, and it will show the darker pixels between those 2 or more layers that are in comparison. So as you can see here, the white color is the brightest color here, and because this blending mode will show you only the darker color. That's why the white color is completely invisible. And the black color, it's 100% visible because that's the darkest color here in the scene. And that's how the Darken blending mode works. So let me show you the real life example. For example, you can go and put maybe this kind of gradient into a Darken blending mode. And as you can see, we'll have this crazy effect, and only the darker pixels will be visible from both layers. But you can lower the opacity and you can produce something like vignetting effect. But there is even better example. If you want to merge two layers together, but you don't want to waste your time extracting the object from one layer to put it to another layer, sometimes the Darken blending mode will do the hard work for you. So let me show you that. For example, we have a birds layer here. And if I want to extract only the birds, to merge only those birds with this scene down below, and I want to put the birds in here upper left corner. If I don't want to waste my time extracting the birds and so on, I can use the Darken blending mode. If I put this into Darken blending mode, you will see that only the birds become visible. Why? Because the birds are the darkest pixels on this layer, and the sky down below, it's darker than the sky on the birds layer, and Darken blending mode will show you only the darkest pixels. I hope that you got it. Alright? And let me show another thing. The Darken blending mode and the darker color blending mode are basically the same. It will give you the same result. Actually, they're not exactly the same, they're similar, because Darken blending mode will go through a red, green and blue channel and compare the pixels from those channels, and then produce final result as a darker version of pixels. And the darker color blending mode will go and only use a merge version of red, green and blue channels, and then produce a final result will be the darker pixels between the current layer and the layer down below. So if I go right here to this luminosity card, here is the Darken and here is the darker color. As you can see there are slightly different result between those two. In the darkest value are basically the same result, but here is the different result because of the process how they compare the pixels between two layers. Alright, now let's go to the next blending mode. It's a multiply, one of the commonly used blending mode in Photoshop, together with screen, overlay and soft light blending modes. Multiply blending mode will actually make your image darker by the percentage of the darkness of the current layer. So what does it mean? That means that here, as you can see, we have 100% darkness, 50% darkness, 20%, 10% and 0% darkness. And because 0% darkness will make your layer darker by that percentage, 0%, that's why the white color is completely invisible to multiply layer. So if I move this to a girl, now the girl is 50% darker than it was before. Now it's 80% darker, 90% darker, 100% darker. If we put some color tint to it, we will have image darker with that color tint. So for example, if you want to maybe darker the image by 50% only, you can create a new layer and fill it with 50% gray. And then we can put it 50% gray in the multiply blending mode and the image will be exactly 50% darker. Or if you want to add some tint to it, you can go to colors here, use any color, maybe red, and go to brightness and set this to 50%. Now we have red color that is 50% with 50% darkness or luminosity. And if we fill this layer with that red color, now we will have the same image 50% darker with that red tint on it. Sometimes this is really useful to use to your images. Okay, and blending mode, it's really useful if you want to get rid of white color. For example, let me show on this image, we have those debris and we want to get rid of white color. We only want to have that crazy particles debris, or I don't know what it is. Just put this layer into multiply blending mode and that's it. As you can see, we have perfectly clean image. Actually, the white color is perfectly gone. Or something like this. If you want to use this explosion, maybe you can put this into multiply blending mode and you will have this crazy effect. Like, whoops, maybe it's not appropriate, but maybe why not? It matches with the face of this guy, right? Or you can put it right here and put the title here, and I don't know, be creative, do something. But the point here is, in the multiply blending mode, the white color will gone completely. So multiply blending mode, get rid of the white color. Okay, the next blending mode is color burn. Color burn will give you slightly darker result and a lot saturated than the multiply. So let me show you that. If you go here and change from multiply to color burn, you will have that saturated, really darker effect. And as you can see, the white color is completely invisible to this color burn blending mode. This is the same or really similar as if you go here, let's duplicate this layer and go to burn tool, right, and just start to burn your image. That color burn effect will basically do the same thing right here. Let me show you. This is with burn tool, this is with color burn, right? That's basically the same effect. And the color burn is really useful if you want to burn your image slightly, but with some color tint in it. So let me show you. If I duplicate this or create a new layer, just new empty layer, put that layer into color burn blending mode. Let's use a brush, maybe 10%, it's okay. And let's use some color, greenish, or let's leave the red color. And for example, I want to make this part darker, but a little bit reddish too. So I can go and just use the color burn blending mode and make this darker with a reddish tint in it. This is really nice. Maybe these stones, I want some reddish tint in it, or piano to have that reddish tint, and so on and so on. You can add some reddish tint here in the sky, etc. Or you can change the color to some green or blue, I don't know, and then add the darker blue version here too, maybe this, and so on and so on. Alright guys, the next blending mode, it's a linear burn. It will give you similar result like color burn, with that difference that it will make less saturated effect and the darker tones will be even darker. So let me show you that. Let's delete this layer. Okay, I don't need that. And let's go here to Luminosity card and change from color burn to linear burn. As you can see, it's not so saturated like color burn, but the darker pixels are even darker. And color burn and linear burn are two of 8 blending modes that behave differently with opacity and fill slider. So with opacity, you'll just make this more or less opaque, but with a fill slider, you will have really different result. And I really love how the color burn behave with the fill. So with the linear burn is the same. Fill will behave differently than opacity. And just play with that. Some effect will be better by changing the fill. Some will be better by changing the opacity. Right, and one more thing that color burn or linear burn has, it's something like this. If you create new layer and let's use some color, maybe this, 100% opacity, and just let's make the brush bigger. Put this like so. Double click on that layer. You will see here on the blending options, you will see transparency shapes layer. You can uncheck this and check this. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't put this into color burn blending mode. Now you can uncheck this. It will have slightly different effect to that layer, and check this, all right? If you uncheck this, it will be like this. If you check it, it will be normal. So sometimes if you uncheck that transparency, it will behave better for some light sources like sun, street lamps, and so on and so on, if you want to emphasize the light effect. Or of course, you don't need to make this so saturated. You can go and change the saturation, maybe change the hue and so on. You can change the lightness, but you can play with that and see what kind of different result will be when this transparency shape layer is checked or unchecked. All right, that's it. Let's delete this layer and let's go to a next blending mode. All right, we already covered this darker color. It's the same like a darken with slightly difference how they comparing the pixels between two layers. So both darken and dark color are not blending pixels, they're just comparing pixels from two or more layers. And as a final result, they will show you the darker version of pixels between those layers. Alright guys, the next group, it's called Lighten, or how I like to call it, black, because the black color is completely invisible to that group, as for the previous group white color was completely invisible. And this group, it's completely opposite than a previous group, and this group will always give you a brighter version of the same image as the final result. So let's check it out. Alright guys, as you can see here, the first blending mode in the Lighten group, it's Lighten. And this blending mode is completely opposite than a Darken. Then screen is completely opposite than a Multiply, and so on and so on. Darker color is completely opposite than a lighter color. So if I put this layer into Lighten blending mode, you will see this crazy result. And same as the previous blending mode, the Lighten blending mode and the lighter color blending mode will not blend pixels together. They will actually compare the pixels from both layers, and as a final result they will show you the brighter version of pixels between those two layers. Alright, and as you can see here, if I go to a lighter color, I will have slightly different result because of that algorithm. One is going through all channels, another is going only to one merge channel. Okay, and the real life example for a Lighten blending mode is really nice, and I use it all the times. Okay, let me show you on another image. Here I have image of this light rails here, and I have three different images with the same background. This is shooted from a tripod, and as you can see, only difference is those light rails. And as you know, Lighten blending mode will show you only the lighter pixels between two layers. So if I go right here and put the first layer into a Lighten blending mode, I will only see addition to those light rails. So I will have more light rails because everything else, actually, as you can see here, one window on this building lights on. That's great. All right. And that's how you can add the lights to your images. Let's go to another layer and let's put this into Lighten blending mode. So now this is before, this is after. Okay, this is original, then added one layer with light rails, then added another layer. At the same way, you can add or you can create a star trails. If you're shooting a star photography, right, and then you shoot few different images, you need to shoot a lot of different images, and then just set all of those layers to a Lighten blending mode, you will have really nice result, really nice star trails. Try it if you are into night photography. All right, let's go back to our document here, and the next blending mode is screen. Screen blending mode is completely opposite than a multiply, so that means that the screen blending mode will make your image brighter by the percentage of the lightness of the current layer. So that means that this is 50% light, we can say that, all right? And the image will be 50% lighter. Here is 0% lightness, and that's why this screen blending mode will not see the black color. And of course, this is 100% lightness, and the image will be completely washed out, completely white. All right, and let me show a real life example, because the screen blending mode cannot see the black color. It's ideal for images like this. If you have smoke or anything on a black background and you want to really fast get rid of that black background, we'll just put that in a screen blending mode and you will see really nice effect. Of course, it's the same here. Let me show you with this explosion. If I put this into screen blending mode, everything black will go away, and you can use that as a frame. You can make it bigger. I don't know. You can play with this. You can create really nice and crazy effects with the screen blending mode. Let's undo this a few times, and that's it. Right, the next blending mode is color dodge, and that's completely opposite than a color burn. So let me show you that. If I go here from screen to color dodge, I will have this crazy washed out effect in highlights, and the shadows, actually the 100% black color will not affect the image, because black color it's completely invisible to this blending mode. And you can see the image will be less saturated and less contrasty than it was before that. So this is basically like you're dodging your image. You can change the fill or you can change the opacity. You will have different results. That's one of the 8 blending modes that will have different result by changing the fill and the opacity. The next blending mode is linear dodge, is similar like color dodge, but the brighter pixels will be even brighter, and it will be even less contrasty and saturated. So you can again change the fill or change the opacity. It will have slightly different result. And the last one, it's lighter color. It's what I already told you at the beginning, similar like a Lighten blending mode with a slightly different algorithm. Alright guys, the next group is called contrast group because all of those blending modes will add some kind of contrast to your image. And I like to call it a gray group because 50% gray color is completely invisible to all blending modes in that group except the hard mix blending mode. We will cover that in a second. So let's check it out. If I switch this from a lighter color to a next group to overlay, you will see we will have a lot contrastier image except the 50% gray color that is completely invisible. It will not impact the image. And overlay blending mode will do like this. Everything that is darker than 50% gray on those pixels will be applied multiply blending mode, and on all pixels that are brighter than 50% gray on those pixels will be applied screen blending mode. So overlay blending mode is basically a combination of multiply and screen blending mode. And overlay blending mode is the only blending mode in that group that makes calculation based of the luminosity of the pixels on the base layer, on the layer down below. All other blending modes in that group will make calculations based of the luminosity pixels of the current layer, right? And overlay blending mode has its own pair, or we can say its own commute layer, and that's the hard light. If I go to hard light, you will see that this is more similar with the multiply and screen blending mode because hard light makes calculation based of the current layer. And what does mean that hard light and overlay are pair or commute layers? That means if we switch the position of those layers and then switch the blending modes, we will have completely exactly result. Let me show you that. For example, here we have luminosity blending mode set on hard light blending mode, and I will merge both layers together into a new layer to have that as a copy with Shift Control Alt E or Shift Command Option E, like so. And now if I change blending mode to normal from luminosity for luminosity card and switch the position of those layers, put the bottom layer at the top of this luminosity card and then put this layer into overlay blending mode, I will have completely same result. This is a result when the bottom layer is over the top of luminosity card, and this is the result that we had before, that luminosity card was over the top of the bottom layer and it was set to hard light here. Okay, and as you can see, completely same result, no difference at all. It would be the same if we put this into a hard light blending mode. We will have this result, and then go down below and put this into overlay. So that's why those layers are pair or commute. That's really handy to know sometimes that you can switch the layer position and then use different blending modes. The next blending mode will be soft light, and you will see that soft light is basically a softer, lighter version of overlay blending mode. So if I move from overlay to soft light, you will see practically a similar result, but a little bit softer with a soft light blending mode. Of course, you can use overlay and soft light blending mode for maybe dodging and burning. A lot of you guys are familiar with that technique, to dodge and burn with a 50% gray layer set in overlay or screen blending mode. If you want to know more about dodging and burning, you can check my tutorial about that right here. Alright guys, the next blending mode is hard light. We already covered that, and hard light is basically a commuted layer to overlay. So let's go to the next one. It's vivid light. Vivid light is basically a stronger version of overlay blending mode, and it's one of 8 blending modes that behave differently if you are lowering the opacity and the fill. So I like to lower the fill here and then to some amount, and then lower the opacity to achieve desired result. Right, let's go to next blending mode. This is a linear light. Linear light is a combination of linear dodge and linear burn, and it works like this. 50% gray is completely invisible. All the pixels that are brighter than 50% gray, on those pixels will be applied a linear dodge blending mode, and on all pixels that are darker than 50% gray will be applied a linear burn blending mode. I like to use the linear light when I sharpening the image. Of course, you can use the overlay and soft light too, but I prefer a linear light. Let me show you really quickly. Let's hide this and make a copy of this layer by pressing Ctrl Command J, right? And let's go to Filter, Other High Pass. And let's zoom it a little bit. Let's see the radius, maybe 0.5. And you can see that this is basically 50% gray layer, except some edges here has that darker and brighter stroke around the edges. And this is really nice because now if we put this in overlay blending mode, you will see, let's zoom it a little bit, you will see before and after, the image seems a little bit sharper because the edges has more contrast in it. If you put in a soft light, the effect will be a little bit subtle, but if you put it in linear light, you will have really strong effect. And sometimes this is really nice for high resolution images to sharpen them. Of course, you can always lower the opacity or put a mask and sharpen only some parts that you want to be sharper. Okay, we have another one. It's Pin Light. Pin Light is combination of Darken and Lighten blending mode. And this is really useful if you want in the same time to compare the brightest and the darkest pixels of two or more layers. And now as the last blending mode of this group, we have a hard mix. Hard mix is really crazy blending mode that will give you as a final result only the base color from RGB or CMYK color spectrum. So let me show you that. If I put this luminosity card into hard mix, you will see this crazy effect. And you will see only colors red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow, of course, black and white. And this is sometimes useful, for example, if you want to create a new layer and use some color. Let's use red again or something like so. Fill it with that color and now put it in hard mix. You can see it's really crazy result, but if you lower the fill or opacity, you will have slightly different results. So I like to lower the fill a little bit and then lower the opacity, and you can colorize the image. For example, maybe this image is a better example. You can colorize C to add some kind of purplish pinkish tint to it. And that's basically it for this group. The next blending mode group, it's called Inversion, and that group will blend the layers based on their difference. So let's check that. Let's duplicate our background layer here and let's go to our inversion group. We have difference, exclusion, subtract and divide blending modes in this group. So difference blending mode will compare the pixels between two layers, and if the pixels are identical, the result will be black color. So if we have two identical layers, we will have as a result completely black layer. So let me show you. Difference, we have completely black layer. The difference blending mode is really useful if you want to align two layers together. If I go to move tool and nudge this layer on the keyboard, you will see now these two layers are not identical because one is move to one side. And if you want to align those two layers together, you know that they are perfectly aligned when they're completely black. So now they're perfectly aligned. And that's where the different blending mode is really useful. Right, the next blending mode in this group, it's exclusion, and I really love to use that blending mode when I'm doing a color correction to an image. So let me show you how it works. Right, let's delete this layer, we don't need it anymore, and let's reveal our luminosity card. Put it in exclusion blending mode, and let's see what this blending mode does to an image. You can see that black color will not affect the image. 50% gray will stay 50% gray, and white color will completely invert the colors of the base layer, of the layer down below. So how we can use this in our advantage, how we can apply this exclusion blending mode to a real life example. Let me show you really quickly. Let's hide this luminosity layer and let's create solid color adjustment layer. Let's use for start black color and put this into exclusion blending mode. As you already saw, the black color will not affect the image, but what happens if we change the color, maybe add some darker bluish tint? You can see that now the shadows are becoming bluish and the highlights are becoming opposite of the blue, that's yellow. It will have that yellowish tint. Maybe this image is a better example, you will see here better. The highlights will have that yellowish tint, and the shadows will have that bluish tint. Of course, those are complementary colors, and any colors you choose for the shadows, the highlights will have that complementary color of that. So this is how I like to use it to colorize my image to add that split toning effect. Right, the next two blending modes are subtract and divide. Subtract blending mode will just subtract the pixels value from the base layer, and the result will be really dark color when subtracting the lightness, and the same or no effect when subtracting the darkness. The divide blending mode will do the opposite. Let me show you really quickly. Alright, we have luminosity card, and let's put it in subtract blending mode. And as you can see here, as the luminosity of the current layer goes higher when the pixels are brighter, the final result will be darker. The black color will not affect the image, and the divide will give you the completely opposite result. Here, as the luminosity goes darker, the final result will be bright image, and here the white color will not affect the image. Right guys, and the final group for this blending mode is called component, and I like to call it a color group because it will affect the colors and luminosity of your image. Let me show you that. We don't need this luminosity card, we'll just need a new empty layer, and I will put this empty layer into hue blending mode. And if I use a brush tool with some color and paint here on the image, I will use 100% opacity. I will just change the hue value of the base layer, of the layer down below, and luminosity will stay intact. As you can see here, I can make the whole image basically purplish because I will change the hue to this purple or pinkish hue actually. Alright, that's how the hue impact the image. This is great if you want to use a brush to change the hue of some colors on the image. Alright, the next blending mode is saturation, and saturation blending mode will just change the saturation of the image, will not mess with the hue or lightness. So let me show you that really quickly. If I go here and put the saturation, let's go here to saturation, put the saturation all the way to 100% of some color, and now put this blending mode in saturation and paint over it, we will have this crazy result, as you can see, because I'm boosting the saturation of the base layer, of the layer down below, all the way to 100%. This is the same if I create a new hue and saturation adjustment layer and boost the saturation all the way to 100%. You can see that this result and this result are basically the same. Okay, now let's delete this, and let's go to next blending mode, and it's color. Color blending mode, sorry, I don't need this layer, I need new empty layer. Color blending mode is really handy when you want to colorize something, especially when you want to colorize black and white images. Let me show you. If I duplicate this and discolorize it, make it black and white with keyboard shortcut Shift Control U or Shift Command U on Mac, and now choose the color, maybe not so saturated, but something like so, and I would just want to paint over the dress. I will give this dress a color. I will not mess with the luminosity will stay the same. I will just add a color, or maybe I want to add a bluish color to the sky. Here I will add that bluish color to the sky. You can just use this technique to paint black and white layers, images, right? Maybe I want to add some orange look to the sun here, and like so you can really nicely paint anything on an image. This is really quickly and sloppy job, but never mind. Let's make this green, and so on and so on. This is how you can paint the image, and this is how the color layer look in a normal blending mode. Just some colors over the top, and you can just put it in color blending mode and paint over the image. Or you can just change the color of the current colored image, like so. You can see this is, you can really nicely change the color. Alright, let's delete that, and let's see the last blending mode. It's luminosity. This is really nice and handy blending mode. This blending mode will not mess with hue or color, it will just change the luminosity. It's really popular, for example, if you're adding contrast to an image using curves, for example. Let's use the curves. And if you add a contrast, the contrast will boost the saturation. But if you put this blending mode to luminosity, then you will only play with luminosity by adding a contrast. You will not add a saturation of this image. So this is really nice and handy way to do it. Another example to play with the luminosity blending mode is to maybe go to black and white adjustment layer, put it in luminosity, and now you can play with color luminosity. You can make the sky darker, you can make the dress brighter or completely black, you can change the sun to black if you want, and so on and so on. This is another really nice example. Alright guys, that was it for layers blending mode. Now let me show you how the groups works with the blending modes. Okay, let's delete this layer because I don't need it anymore, and let's go here, reveal this layer, create a group, put this layer inside the group, and maybe use the curves adjustment layer, put it in a group. And I need one more, maybe this explosion. Okay, now I have 3 layers inside this group, and if I go to a group, you can see that the group is set on a pass-through adjustment layer. What does it mean? That means that if I change, maybe I will hide this, if I change the brightness of the curves, I will affect all layers that are inside that group and all layers that are below that group. But if I go and put the blending mode of a group from pass-through to normal, then I will affect only the layers that are inside that group. And same is for this. If I go and put this into multiply blending mode, right, this explosion, and my group is set into normal blending mode, that multiply blending mode will affect only to layers that are inside the group. If I hide this layer down below, it will not have any effect to the layers down below. But if I go from a normal to pass through, this multiply blending mode inside the group will affect to all layers down below. That's really useful to know because sometimes you want to have adjustment layers inside that group that will affect only the group. Sometimes you want to affect all other layers. Okay, and we have another adjustment layers, and that are adjustment layers for the brushes. We have 2 new adjustment layers. This is behind and clear. Behind works like this. Let's use a color, maybe red, create a new layer, and let's put it out of the group, and let's paint it here. If I paint here with the red and then I choose another color, maybe blue, okay, I will paint over the red, but nothing happens because actually I'm now painting behind that red. You can see red will not be affected. Or if I choose third color, maybe green, I will paint behind those 2 layers. Basically, this is what behind adjustment layer does. Behind blending mode. If I choose a clear, this blending mode behaves like a brush. I can just brush all out from this layer, and that's it. Alright guys, that's finally it for today. It was a longer tutorial, but this topic is really important to master. I hope that you like this tutorial and that you learned something new today. If you have any questions at all regarding to this episode, please leave them in the comments below. I will be glad to answer them. If you want to support me on this channel to make it even bigger and better, you can do it by visiting my Patreon page. The link is down there in the description. And of course, you will get some things in return. Alright guys, subscribe if you're not already, ring that bell to get notified about the future episodes, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.